Hello everyone, today we will be discussing Adobe Commerce Cloud variables. While it may seem straightforward, the reality is that there are various types of variables and multiple locations where they can be modified. That's why in this video I will be sharing all the essential and valuable information on managing variables. Let's switch to the Adobe Commerce Cloud documentation, and here on this page and basically on the sub pages that we can see here, we can find all the necessary informations on variables management. If something is not clear, please always refer to this page. And of course, there are a lot of different settings that can change the behavior of the application or the deployment process. So for example, if we go to the global, we'll of course go over it later, but for example, here we can see different variables that alter the behavior of the deployments of Adobe Commerce. So we will not go over those one by one. As you can see, there are a lot of those, and even more if we go to, for example, a build process and deploy and post-deploy, there are even more. So the idea here is that after watching this video, you will be able to efficiently manage your variables in your e-commerce application, and rest you will be able to find in the documentation. So I will also record a video about build and deploy process optimization, and then you will see some of these variables in action. So stay tuned for this video, and for now let's tackle firstly where we can change variables. There are 4 places where you can configure different types of variables in Adobe Commerce Cloud. So there is Cloud Console and the variables section in project settings or environment settings. Also, the same variables can be changed by using the Magento Cloud CLI and the variables command. So here we can see those commands. And also we have the Magento.env.yml file, and this is a sample configuration that I took from some of my project. So here is just a sample configuration. Here in this file we can alter the deployment build process of the Adobe Commerce Cloud, and also there is a Magento.app.yml file and the variables section. So also we can alter some configurations of Adobe Commerce. Okay, so each of these places affects different parts of the Adobe Commerce. That's why let's first see what types of variables Adobe has distinguished in the documentation. So let's get back to our browser and go to the documentation again. So here let's go to the environment variables page, and here it is important, before we go over those types, let's firstly explain how it actually works. So Adobe Commerce on Cloud Infrastructure enables you to assign environment variables to override configuration options. So the ECE tools package sets values in the env.php file based on values from cloud variables sent in the Cloud Console, and the Magento.env.yml configuration file. So those variables are copied by the ECE tools, and the ECE tools basically sets the value of those variables into the env.php. So it is changing the configuration of our Adobe Commerce instance. And of course we can create our own environment variables. And what types of environment variables we can notice here? So firstly we have admin variables override project admin variable. So if we go to this page, we can see that we have like admin username, email, password, locally admin URL. So if we set these variables in our Cloud Console, we can actually create, for example, a new admin. So this will be like a default admin account for our environment. And also with the admin URL, we can set the like what is the URL for the backend of our Adobe Commerce, right? So these variables can be changed, for example, in here. As you can see, actually they are already created. So I have configured that there is admin email, first name, last name, username. There is no password actually created, but this is just a sample configuration. So here you can see that those environment variables are created here. Also, we can do it by using the Magento Cloud CLI, but this is the place where we can change the admin variables. If we get back, we have the next one, Magento Cloud. So those are variables specific to cloud infrastructure, and these variables are actually like they cannot be changed anywhere, because those are like the settings of Adobe Commerce Cloud. So we can check them if we, for example, go to the SSH of a particular environment. We can check what is the content of this specific variable, but we cannot change the content of it. We cannot change the value. So for example, Magento Cloud relationships, Magento Cloud routes. Then we have variables used in the .Magento.env.yml file. And this is the file that I showed you here. So Magento.env.yml file. And this file consists of a couple of sections. So there is a global section and it affects build, deploy and post-deploy stages. There is a build, so those variables only control the build actions. There is deploy, so it only controls the deploy action, and there is also post-deploy, so it only controls the after deploy actions. So we will also go over it, and in the next video I'm going to create a explanation of how the deployment of Adobe Commerce works. So we'll see actually those phases, how they are created, what each phase is doing. So we'll tackle it in the next video. Alright, so let's switch to Cloud Console. Here is our Vaimo Pro project. Let's click on it, and here is the settings button. So if we click on it, we will be redirected to the settings of a project, and on the left we can choose the variables section. So here is the place where we configure all the project variables, so those variables are available for all the environments for the Adobe Commerce Cloud. So here we can see a couple of variables like Blackfire, server ID, server token and composer auth, and you can notice that all of those variables have this prefix env colon. And basically for all the custom environment variables that are not defined in the documentation page. So for example, if we go to admin, for admin username or admin URL, we don't need to add this prefix, because this is something that is configured in the ECE tools in Adobe Commerce Cloud, so there is no need for that. But if you want to override some Adobe Commerce configuration, or if you want, for example, to have this composer auth, so this is the JSON that helps to authenticate Composer to different services, you need to add this prefix, because if we don't do it, this environment variable will not be actually applied to our environment. Also, on right we have a type. So we have a build runtime, or for example for a composer auth there is only build. So this means that this particular variable is available in the build phase, when the actual Adobe Commerce Cloud is deploying, building the application, and also in runtime. So when you go after basically the deployment, if you go and log into SSH of your server of your environment, you will also be able to get this variable. So for example, the composer auth is only required in the build process. So once the build is finished, we have all the vendor packages, modules installed in our directory. There is no need to have this composer auth available in the runtime. Alright, so now let's go to environments variables section. So we can use this menu on the left and go to feature XYZ, which is our environment for our testing. So we won't change anything in project settings, we will actually do it in the feature XYZ environment. And here firstly you can notice that on the right we have some labels saying that, for example, admin email is overriding. So here we can see that it's overriding the parent environment variable, right? So on the parent, either or the onDev or a master, this environment variable is set. So we are overriding this again for admin first name, last name, username, but on the env composer auth we can see that there is also a label called inherited. So it is inherited from a parent environment, but it's overriding the project level variable. So if you hover the label, you can also have some tooltips. So those are overriding the parent environment variable. This one is overriding the project level variable, but it is also inherited from a parent environment. So if we go to the develop variables section, we can see again that env composer auth is also inherited from a parent and again overriding the project level variable. So this composer auth will be actually set in the master, which is the parent of all our environments. So here we can see that indeed here is the environment composer of overriding the project level variable, but it is actually set here. So it is important to be aware of how you can actually find if like what is the level set on this variable, where it's set, and so on. So you can use those labels to actually do it. Let's back to feature XYZ and let's actually add some variable. So let's click on the create variable button, and for our purposes we'll use the admin variables section. So we'll, for example, use the admin URL to set the URL of our admin of Adobe Commerce. So whatever it is right now set will be overridden by the admin URL variable. So ECE-tools will take this value and configure the env.php file. So we can do it by using the Magento Cloud variable update, but we can also just copy the new admin path. So we'll actually just take it and we'll just paste it here as a value, and the variable name is admin URL. So also let's paste it here, and here we have some options. So do we want to make this variable available during runtime? So make this variable available during the runtime of this project, and here is a tooltip that it's available for while it's running, right? So when we go to the SSH, this variable will be available, and or when it's deploying. So like I said, in the next video we'll go over the details of how, like what is in the deploying phase, what's in the building phase, and so on. For now we need to make sure that this is checked here, because the actual admin URL setting is done in the deploy phase, not in the build. So we can make this available during build time. It's not necessary because it won't change anything. If we just would use the available during build time, this admin URL will not be set. For now, just make sure that this is selected here. We can also make sure that we set that this value is a JSON value, so it will be interpreted as a JSON serialized value instead of a simple string. We can make this variable sensitive, so in case there you have some password, keys or anything, you should make it sensitive, so actually no one can see the value. And make it inheritable, so make child environments inherit this variable. If you set it as no, this variable will not be available in the child environments. So it doesn't matter for us, we can make it inheritable. So let's create this variable. And it's important to be aware that when we change variables, automatic deployments of our Adobe Commerce environment will start. So here we have a confirmation that the admin URL is set. It is new admin and something. It is runtime and inheritable. So if we get back to our project environment feature XYZ, so indeed a new deployment is running. And in the meantime, while it's deploying, we'll get back to our settings of our environment and we will add a new variable. And this time this will be a variable with the env prefix. So I want to show you that if we configure something here with this prefix, it will be available when we log into our SSH of our environment. So if we configure whatever we want here, so this is a custom variable, so for example debug, and we just, let's say, debug value. This is just a sample variable, and it's important to set here that it is available during runtime, right? It needs to be set, because if we do not set it, it won't be available. It doesn't need to be available during build time. It is a custom variable. It won't be picked up by the ECE-tools. It's not necessary, and the other options are there are options, so we don't need to change anything here. So let's also create a new variable here. Alright, so we can see that deployments with admin URL and debug variables are done. So now let's go to over our shell. We are in the feature XYZ environment, and let's connect to our Magento SSH. So let's open the app etc env.php, and here we should see that the indeed admin URL is changed. So to find it, we should find the front name. it should be front, let's say front. Oh, here it is. So there is a front name, which is now saying that it's new admin. So this is the value that we configured in the admin URL. And to confirm that it actually works, we can go to our browser again, we can open our environment and just paste the new admin variable, and indeed the URL works correctly. So by changing the admin URL or adding the admin URL inside of our environment variables, we can change the behavior of our Adobe Commerce application. And also we added this env debug, so let's check if it's actually available in our environment. So to do it, let's go again to our shell. Let's turn off the V editor, and now we can simply just use the echo and debug. And we can see that indeed the environment variable is available for us. Now we will focus on the Magento Cloud CLI. So let's run the Magento Cloud list to see all the available comments, and at the very bottom we can see that we have 5 comments related to managing of variables. So we can create, delete, view variable, we can list variables on the environment, or update an existing variables. So for now, let's just use the variable list. Let's add the parameter help, so we can filter by the level. So we can define that we only want to see like project variables or environment variables. We can select the format. By default it is a table. We can make it CS file, or we can also select what columns we want to display. So let's just use the variable list and see what we've got here. So we can see all the environment variables. Basically, it is the same view, the same variables that we can see in the Cloud Console, right? Because we can also see that we have like project variables, and these are the same as in Cloud Console, and there are environment variables set on this specific environment. So we have, for example, the admin email, which is set to my email address, and then we have also some admin URL or env debug that we configured. So also we can, for example, get a variable name, get variable by a name. So we can just try using, for example, the admin URL. So we can confirm that indeed the admin URL is created. We have some additional information like when it was created, when it was updated, value. We have also those attributes like is it sensitive, is visible during build or runtime. So all those additional informations can be found here. So now, for example, we can try updating the admin URL variable by using the variable update command. So let's firstly copy that and use the help parameter. So we have some additional parameters. So basically with the update, we can not only change the value of a variable, we can also change the options or attributes related to a variable. So for example, we can make it as JSON, we can make it sensitive, enabled, disabled, inheritable, and so on. So we can all make it by using this command. So for example, let's maybe change this variable, just let's update the variable value. So how we can do it? So we should firstly add the value, what we want to change it. So for example, now we want to change it new admin, and that's it, and specify the name of a variable, so it will be admin URL, and that's basically it. So we can see that the variable admin URL has been updated with a new value, and there is a deployment associated with this change. Alright, so we know how to update a variable. Now let's actually create a new one. So Magento Cloud variable create help. Let's see what we've got here, and it's basically the same as the update command, but here we can actually see that there is an update parameter, so we can use this to actually update. So we can either use the variable update command or use variable create with the update option, and rest stays the same. So we can set the level of the variable, name, value, and all the attributes like visible build, visible runtime, and so on. So let's actually add a new debug, let's say, or test variable. So we just use variable create, it will be name, and let's set it test. Value will be test value, for example, and we can set the level of it as environment. And we can also make it visible in runtime, or we do not need to do it actually because this is by default true. So that should be enough to create a new variable. On what environment should the variable be set? We need to also set the environment here, right? So by default, yes, we just confirm that. And we can see the confirmation that Adobe Commerce Cloud creates variable env test on the environment feature X, Y, Z. So here is the confirmation and the associated deployment. And last but not least, there is this command to remove variables, which is the Magento Cloud variable delete. Let's open the help, and here as an argument we specify the variable name that we want to remove, and we have some options to define, like for example, if you want to remove the variable from the project level or from the environment level, right? We can also define the project or environment that we want to, from which environment we want to remove this specific variable name, because as we know, we have we can override, we can inherit variables and so on. So we need to define what variable actually we want to remove. So we have a simple example here. Let's just copy that, and we will actually remove the env test variable that we created before. And because we didn't specify any option, Adobe Commerce Cloud will ask us some questions. So for example, are we sure that we want to delete the variable env test from the environment feature XYZ? Yes, we are sure. We just confirm that. And we have a confirmation that the variable is deleted, and there is an ongoing deployment to apply this change. Alright, so we know how to configure variables by using the Magento Cloud CLI, by using the Cloud Console. And before we go to the next topic, I just quickly want to show you how we can check the content of Magento Cloud variables that we saw in the documentation. So if we go to the documentation, to the cloud specific variables page, we can see that there are like a list of Magento Cloud variables. So those variables, we cannot update it by using the Cloud Console or Magento Cloud CLI. We can of course alter, for example, the Magento.app.yml file and change the application name, and then the Magento Cloud application name will be changed. But those variables are configured based on the configuration of our Adobe Commerce Cloud. So we can mostly just see what we've got there. And for example, to see the content of, for example, Magento Cloud variables or relationships or routes, we can use the ECE tools command. So we will see that in a second. And also we can just simply use the echo command to just simply display the value. So let's go to our SSH. Let's use this command, and we can use vendor bin ECE tools. So let's list a command list for this package. So we can see there is this env config show. Let's run it. And here we can see some values of those variables. So we have a Magento Cloud environment variables. So this is related to Magento Cloud variables. We have Magento Cloud routes, which is related to Magento Cloud routes, and so on. So not every variable is displayed in here. That's why, for example, if you want to display, I don't know, let's say Magento Cloud project, we can use the echo command. Simply like that. And we get the value. If we want to, for example, open the Magento Cloud route, we can also use the Magento Cloud, but this is the base 64 encoded string. So if you want to decode it, we can use the command in a format like this. So we are passing the Magento Cloud route to base 64 decode and then formatting into JSON. So if we do it, indeed, we receive the correct root variable. Alright, so we know how to deal with Magento Cloud variables, and now let's talk about the Magento.env.yml file. So in the PHP Storm, I created a new file called Magento.env.yml file. You can see a sample configuration here. But what is the purpose of this file? This file uses variables to centralize the management of build and deploy actions across of our environments. And it is important to be aware that when we deploy this configuration change, for example, to the feature XYZ, it is only applied to this specific environment. It is not shared to all the environments. So whenever you change something in this file, you need to deploy every single environment to apply those changes. Also, you can notice that there is this Magento.env.yml dist file with a documentation of all possible variables, and it is actually the same that we have in the documentation. So if we go to the configure environment deployment, we can notice that there is this file structure. So let's go over it right now. So the file structure of the Magento.env.yml file contains stage and log sections. So stage, use the stage section to define certain actions for the following stages of deployment. So with the stage, we can alter the behavior of a build, deploy and post-deploy phases. And also there is this global configuration that applies to all of those phases. So we can configure and alter the behavior of the Adobe Commerce Cloud deployment. And also there is this log section, so we can configure some notifications or log handlers. So for example, we can configure to send a Slack message when for example there is a successful deployment. And all the possible variables are described here in the override variables section. So for example, all the variables related to the global section are configured and are explained here. So it contains like what is the possible configuration options, what is the default value version, some description, some sample configuration, and we have all the same for build, deploy and post-deploy. So for example, when you are interested in the deploy variables, you just simply go to deploy page, and you can see there is a lot of variables, so we are not going to go over those variables. I will create a video with explanation on how to optimize some deployment phases. So we will actually use some of those variables, but for now let's just switch again to PHP Storm and let's go to this time Magento.app.yml file, because there is a last place that I wanted to mention to you. So there is this variables section in this file, so we can configure actually some variables that are then translated to the core config data in Adobe Commerce. So by using the special format of those variables, we can alter the core config data, and it is all explained in the documentation as well here. So if we go to configure environment deployment, we should go to the application and properties variables. So this is all described here. So you can use application-based environment variables to customize store configurations, and these variables use a specific syntax. So if you click on this link, all the necessary links will be added as a description to this video, so don't worry about it. But here there is an explanation of how to basically override some store configurations in the core config data. So we can simply use this page as a reference, and if you need to configure something in the Adobe Commerce Cloud, for example, by default we use this PayPal onboarding. So for example, whenever all the environments in the core config data will have this config set. Alright, that was an intensive session. I hope you stayed with me to the end of it, and now you are able to efficiently work with variables in your projects. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.